I am so excited to welcome Dr. Bill Vandergrift. Dr. Bill is a world-renowned equine nutritionist with around 40 years of experience. He has been a university professor. He has consulted for Olympic level horses. He has consulted for world champions, and he even holds a world title of his own. Dr. Bill is very well known for his state-of-the-art formulas and advanced thinking when it comes to formulating diets for horses. So today we're going to do a deep dive into two supplements designed by Dr. Bill himself, one called Moving Up and the other called The Difference. So by giving him this platform, I think that we're all going to come out of this a little bit better versed in the functional technologies that are really available for supporting our equine athletes. I think we can all agree that a healthy horse is built from the inside out. So without further ado, let's hear it straight from the expert. Welcome, Dr. Bill.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Dr. Nichols. Before we get started discussing Moving Up and the Difference, I'd like to take an opportunity for all of you listening in that Stride is really in a unique position. As Dr. Nichols indicated, I've been involved in this for well over 40 years now, and I know of very few other companies that have the thinking power, so to speak, that Stride does. Dr. Nichols is a very capable and accomplished horse person, horsewoman herself, as well as a very knowledgeable equine nutritionist. So with the two of us working together, we're able to, work with you with your individual horses and solve most issues that come our way. So before I forget to say that at the end, I hope everybody takes advantage of, the knowledge base that is available to you through Stride. And that being said, we'll start with two products, Moving Up in the Difference. The reason we're going to discuss both of these within one webinar is they are both somewhat similar, but with some very distinct differences. As a consulting equine nutritionist that's, worked with some of the best horses in the world, literally, some of the situations that I've run into are such that I've sometimes had individual horses that might be headed to the World Equestrian Games, headed to, a G1 level race, whether it's the Derby or the Breeders' Cup or Japan Cup. And these horses sometimes run into a little glitch in their performance. And that's not an unusual thing. And so I've been able to put together some products in some cases for one specific horse. And that's actually how Moving Up came into being. This was a product that was initially put together for a horse that was going to compete at the World Equestrian Games. And obviously it worked well for that individual horse. And so I knew that there were other horses that had similar situations. So we tweaked it a little bit to make it applicable on a more, wide range for, the general horse population, so to speak. But both Moving Up and the Difference came into being because they were developed to help horses that were competing at the upper levels either reach and or maintain their peak performance levels. Both of these products support muscle function. So both products are geared towards working with horses' muscles, but each one has a different application. So it's kind of like the emphasis is on a different syllable between the two products. And we'll go into that. And hopefully when you go home from this webinar today, you'll understand where Moving Up fits and where the Difference fits and where you would use each one. So whether you use the Moving Up product or the Difference is going to be dependent upon what your primary objectives are for that individual horse, because both products do have some similarities, and we'll talk about those. So even though they do have some individual functions, we don't recommend that an individual horse receive both the moving up and the difference at the same time. It's safe to do that. I mean, you're not going to hurt your horse by any means, but at the same time, it's not going to be very efficacious to feed the two of them together. So one of my objectives for today is to help you differentiate when and where you would use either the moving up or the difference. So let's start with the 5 common features between these two products. First thing I want to mention, because we get asked this a lot, anytime you're dealing with products that are designed to enhance muscle function, people want to know, is it safe to be used in my particular competitive venue? Both of these products are completely safe to be used under any equine discipline, including United States Equestrian Federation and FEI sanctioned events. So you can feel confident using either one, regardless of where and under what rules and regulations you're competing. The second one, or second common feature, both products utilize nitric oxide technology in order to enhance the performance of the horse. Nitric oxide is a compound that's naturally produced in the body. It's produced in my body, it's produced in your body, it's produced in your horse's body. The best way to describe a major function of nitric oxide in regard to horses, however, is we all know that horses are fright and flight animals. If they get scared, their primary means of survival is to find a new zip code, so to speak. In other words, get as far away from the danger as possible. So it's that very quick adrenaline rush, that gives them the speed and the strength and to get away from danger. Well, one of the things that happens in that adrenaline rush is you get a very quick increase in nitric oxide production in the horse's body. That nitric oxide spike then stimulates vasodilation. So that vasodilation increases blood flow to the horse's muscles. So the horse's muscles can then obtain increased blood flow, increased nutrient supplies in order to very quickly fuel that muscular speed and power they need to run away from whatever they perceive as a danger. Now, in the normal physiology of nitric oxide metabolism, nitric oxide has a very short half-life. So it's that quick, I'm scared, I run, I'm safe now, and then that nitric oxide effect under normal circumstances will quickly decrease. What we've been able to do, and when I say we, I'm kind of talking about the scientific community in general. We've known what nitric oxide does in the body for a long time, but it's only been within the last, 15, 20 years really, that we've been able to kind of harness this nitric oxide technology where we can maintain that nitric oxide or that vasodilation effect from nitric oxide for a longer period of time, and thereby enhance performance in the horses. And this nitric oxide technology is also used in a lot of different areas in human medicine as well. So any place where vasodilation would be a benefit, you're starting to see nitric oxide technology used more and more. So both moving up and the difference incorporate technology that supports a constant production of nitric oxide. And another nice thing about the nitric oxide molecule is it's also anti-inflammatory. So you not only get improved vasodilation or improved blood flow, but you also get an anti-inflammatory effect as well. So the bottom line is that when you trigger nitric oxide production in the muscles, that helps those muscles perform at their optimal level. Another common feature between the two is both of these products contain the amino acid LLeucine. Now, L-leucine is one of the dietary essential amino acids. It's not considered to be one of the first or second or even third limiting amino acids, but it is a dietary essential amino acid, meaning that the horse's body can't make it on its own. It has to be supplied in the diet. So normally we would assume that if your horse is obtaining enough of the first limiting amino acid, which is L-leucine, in methionine and threonine, et cetera, that he would be getting enough L-leucine. And the majority of the cases he is or she is. But what we have learned from research, though, is that in regard to muscle protein metabolism specifically, L-leucine is actually the most important amino acid in terms of muscle strength and muscle growth. So by supplying levels of L-leucine that are a bit higher than what you would normally find in a horse's diet, you can help support increased or optimal muscle strength and muscle growth. Let's take a look at some data in chart form that was presented by researchers at the University of Kentucky several years ago, where they looked at the effect of various nutrients, amino acids, leucine in particular, carbohydrates, how these nutrients interacted with exercise in regard to net protein muscle balance or protein balance of muscle cells, in other words, muscle strength, and also how they might affect muscle mass. In other words, how do I get muscle hypertrophy? And they actually came up with some interesting results. And this is for the horse. This would not necessarily be applicable for the human athlete. This is specifically applicable for the equine athlete. And so if we look at our very first row here, we look at if we just took a horse, we were not exercising this horse. He may be turned out, for some free exercise. And all we did was increase his amino acid intake with emphasis on increasing leucine intake. Simply by increasing leucine intake, we increase protein synthesis in that horse's muscles. Now, muscles are not like concrete. In other words, when you lay down protein in the muscle, it's not there forever and ever, amen. It's constantly being turned over. So you have protein being built up and you have protein being broken down. So we have to look at the net effect between protein synthesis or buildup of protein in the muscles and protein breakdown. So there's two ways or a couple of ways that we can increase muscle strength. One would be increase protein synthesis in the muscle without changing breakdown. Another one would be, as in the case of exercise and carbohydrates, would be to reduce muscle breakdown. So you've got these two effects that we need to balance off. We want to build muscle or build muscle protein up more than we're increasing protein breakdown by the muscle. So by simply applying or simply increasing amino acid or leucine intake without even exercising the horse, we can increase protein synthesis by the muscle. We either do not change or actually decrease the protein breakdown. So the net effect is we get a fairly substantial increase in protein synthesis by the muscle. So in other words, we improve muscle strength and get a slight increase in muscle mass. And that is simply the effect of increasing these functional amino acids or leucine in the horse's diet. And you now have some products on the market that take advantage of that research and that technology simply by increasing the amino acid intake in the horse's diet. We can get that net effect of improving muscle strength and a slight increase in muscle mass. So we hear a lot about that in regards to improving a horse's top line, for example. Okay, the next effect or next parameter they looked at is what happens if we increase carbohydrates only without increasing protein or without any exercise. Interestingly, whoops, sorry, when we, I keep losing my mouse, folks, so bear with me, there we are. So when we increase carbohydrate intake, obviously you get an insulin effect. So insulin levels increase, and that's what triggers the increase in protein synthesis by the muscle, even though you haven't actually fed any additional amino acids. It's the effect of the insulin on the muscles which gives you that increase in protein synthesis. Notice that protein breakdown by the muscle is not affected. So your net effect is you get a slight improvement in muscle protein synthesis. In other words, slight increase in muscle strength, but notice you have no change on the effect of muscle mass. So when you would visually look at this horse that you increase the carbohydrate intake into, but you haven't exercised the horse, you haven't fed him any additional amino acids, you'd really not notice any difference at all in his muscle development because there wouldn't be any change there. Now, another one that might be a little bit of a surprise to you is what happens if we exercise only. So we don't increase amino acid intake, we don't increase carbohydrate intake, but now we are exercising the horse. So what effect does exercise have on muscle protein synthesis? You'll notice that, or metabolism, I should say. You'll notice the protein synthesis increases as a result of exercise, but so doesn't protein breakdown. So exercise then increases muscle turnover is what that essentially illustrates. So you're stimulating protein synthesis by the muscle, but the exercise is also increasing protein breakdown by the muscle. But because of that exercise, you do get a slight increase in muscle strength, which you would expect. That's one reason why we exercise. But again, notice no change in muscle mass. And that's the part that may be a little bit surprising. You would think that by exercising, you might see an increase in the muscle mass on the horse. But exercise by itself really will not change the muscle mass or the muscle definition in a horse. And that's one area that the horse is different from the human. Now let's start combining exercise with amino acids. You'll notice now we get a significant increase in protein synthesis by the muscle. Now remember, when we just increased amino acid intake only, our muscle breakdown or our protein breakdown by muscles actually increased or stayed the same. But when we include exercise with amino acids, we don't have any real effect on the breakdown of protein. So the net effect is we get a very significant increase in protein synthesis or strength by the muscle and a mild increase in muscle mass. Okay, exercise with carbohydrates. Interestingly enough, remember when we fed carbohydrates without exercise, we got an increase in protein synthesis. Exercise with carbohydrates, essentially you get no change in protein synthesis. You increase muscle breakdown, again, because now you're exercising those muscles. They need the protein, but they're not getting it. What you're giving them is carbohydrate, and that's not really what they need. But the net result is you get a slight increase in muscle strength as a result of the exercise, but again, no change in muscle mass. So carbohydrates really are not the thing to feed a horse if you're trying to increase muscle mass. It's exercise and amino acids. But now, what happens if we put all three together, which is the last row? We get a significant or substantial increase in protein synthesis. We still get an increase in protein breakdown by the muscle, but look what happens to our muscle strength. Substantially and significantly increases, and look what happens to our muscle mass. Now we get a significant increase in muscle mass. So if you're really wanting to improve muscle strength, muscle stamina, muscle mass, you really have to supply all three parameters, those being exercise, amino acids with emphasis on leucine, and carbohydrates. And we'll talk about this a bit more as we go through. But that is a very quick, basic lesson on how exercise and nutrients affects muscle function in the horse. And it's a good idea to have a basic understanding of how that works. So, you can say, well, I've been exercising my horse and I'm feeding him, more oats or more sweet feed, but I don't see much happening. It could be you're leaving out the fact that you've got to do something about increasing the amino acid intake at the same time. Okay, so a fourth common feature between Moving Up and the difference is they both supply a proprietary and very powerful antioxidant package. When you exercise, the muscles are going to produce free radicals, which are very strong oxidizing agents. And that's why you need an antioxidant to counteract those free radicals that are produced by exercising muscles. This is part of that, in the previous slide or the chart, you notice that exercise only increased muscle breakdown. So that's simply effect of exercise, and that increased muscle breakdown also increases free radical production. Elevated free radical production interferes with protein and energy metabolism by muscles. So this can lead to muscle tightness, it can lead to fatigue or lack of stamina, and depending upon the horse's individual metabolic makeup or DNA, can also lead to tying up. Now, traditional antioxidants, which you will find in essentially any decent horse feed on the market these days, are vitamin E, vitamin C, selenium, which I don't have listed here, but your traditional antioxidants, and those are all needed, and those should be provided in your horse's diet. But remember, Moving Up in the difference are supplements designed to take it to another level. Essentially, that's where the term or the name Moving Up came from, is we're trying to take the horse up. We're trying to take him or her to a whole new level in terms of performance. So we've included some not necessarily run-of-the-mill antioxidants in these products, but they're very powerful and effective antioxidants. For example, alpha lipoic acid you will find in both products. So by supplying these powerful antioxidants, we can help keep those muscles functioning during intense exercise. Then the fifth common denominator or common feature of these products is they both supply essential B vitamins that are required for optimal protein and energy metabolism, as well as stress resistance. So when our horses are exercising at increased or intense levels, they're going to experience stress just from that physical activity. If they're performance horses and show horses and they're being campaigned, then the stress from the travel and the showing, etc., also adds to it. And the requirement for certain B vitamins, specifically folic acid and pyridoxine or vitamin B6, increases. Now, the levels of these vitamins, folic acid and B6, in your horse's regular diet under these conditions may not be adequate to meet the horse's requirement. That's why in Moving Up in the difference, we make sure that we increase the inclusion rate of these particular B vitamins so we can help the horse deal with that increased stress level, as well as keep muscle function operating at an optimal level. So those are the 5 common features between the two. Now let's talk about some of the unique features of each one. And first we'll start with Moving Up. And I'm just going to kind of include three unique features of moving up. The first one is that moving up supplies another very specific amino acid, and that amino acid happens to be beta-alanine. Now, beta-alanine is not a dietary essential amino acid. Okay, the horse's body can make beta-alanine provided it receives enough protein in general. But beta-alanine is needed to produce creatinine in the muscle cell. And creatinine is a major energy producing molecule inside the muscle cell itself. And I use this analogy. Think of it as the battery in your cell phone. If your cell phone battery dies, then you're out of luck. You can't use your phone because your phone is dead. Okay, it no longer works. When the creatinine levels in muscle cells fall to low levels, then muscle function doesn't die. I don't want to, don't worry, your horse is not going to keel over. But what happens is that muscle strength, muscle stamina, muscle function declines significantly. So obviously the horse is not going to be able to perform at optimal levels when creatinine levels get very low. So creatinine, though, you say, well, why don't we just feed creatinine if it's so important? Unfortunately, the way that creatinine would be digested and absorbed in the body is such that it's essentially denatured and totally broken down in the digestive process. So any creatinine that's in the diet would actually never make it to the muscle cell in the form of creatinine. So what we have to do are supply the building blocks of creatinine for the horse, beta-alanine being the most limiting factor for creatinine production by the muscle cells in the horse. So by supplying beta-alanine, we can increase creatinine levels in the muscular cell. We increase that cellular energy level or boost, and now we have improved stamina. Now, the process of taking added beta-alanine from the diet and turning it into creatinine in the muscle cell requires the activation of some metabolic enzymes in order for that process to become active and get a full response. Anytime you're trying to activate certain enzymes in the metabolism of a horse, it normally takes at least a week, sometimes up to 2 weeks before that becomes fully effective. So this is something about moving up that you have to keep in mind. So for example, if it's Friday afternoon and you're showing your horse tomorrow, you're not going to be able to just begin feeding moving up today and expect to get a response within 24 hours. You want to feed it at least a week to 2 in advance and let those enzymes get activated, let that beta-alanine become creatinine, and that give your horse about a week for that to happen. But by so doing, though, you are going to boost the battery charge, so to speak, on those muscle cells and definitely increase your horse's stamina when he's trying to perform some activities that require muscle strength and muscle power. A second unique feature of moving up is it provides functional peptides that are used for protein metabolism as well as immunoglobulin production. So kind of two different little functions here. So horses that are in intense exercise, as we already mentioned, are under increased stress. And because of that, they often experience a reduced immune function. So keeping an immune system working optimally is important to maintaining good muscle function, maintaining peak performance. So by providing these immunoglobulins and peptides that are used to produce those immunoglobulins, we can keep that immune function or immune system functioning at optimal levels and help that horse deal with stress. We're also going to be supplying some proteins and small chain amino acids or peptides that the muscle cell will use to actually increase the horsepower of those muscles. And I and pun intended, but that's really the best way to look at it. You are going to increase your horse's power by providing these functional peptides. So, or muscle strength is another way to look at it. And then the third unique feature of moving up is it contains a unique form of vitamin E. I think a lot of us are familiar with, supplying D-alpha tocopherol, the natural form of vitamin E, for horses that are having issues with low vitamin E levels. Some of us may not be aware that there's a whole nother form of vitamin E, and that is gamma tocopherol. Gamma tocopherol has a unique function in the body in that it specifically supports the immune system. And so it's just another tool or nutritional tool that we're using to help these horses maintain optimal immune function, and by so doing, keeping muscle strength and muscle stamina working at the level we want it to. Okay, now let's look at 3 unique features of the difference. And so we can begin to see how these two separate a little bit. So the difference supplies the only approved source of chromium for horses at functional levels. Okay. Chromium is a very interesting nutrient, and only recently has there been a bona fide approved source of chromium for horses. But chromium will enhance carbohydrate metabolism. It will improve insulin sensitivity. So anybody that's got a horse that might be a little bit insulin resistant, chromium may help improve insulin sensitivity. And I put the emphasis on the word may. Depending upon, it's kind of like how insulin resistant your horse is. If your horse is just becoming insulin resistant, chromium can be a real benefit. If your horse is quite insulin resistant, in other words, his insulin levels are quite high, then chromium's probably not going to be real effective at reversing that. But horses that are exercising at intense levels, we're actually more interested in facilitating optimal insulin function. So that's really the goal of chromium in the difference. And also chromium is involved in growth hormone function. So you see how we're now combining 3 things here. Remember earlier we talked about the effects of exercise and carbohydrates and amino acids on muscle strength and muscle mass. Chromium is going to influence how carbohydrates are in fact utilized during exercise. They're also going to influence how proteins, through the action of growth hormone, are going to be utilized during exercise. So chromium, when supplied at what we call physiological levels, which is our levels above and beyond what a horse would find in his natural diet, okay, in his natural environment, we can really enhance protein and energy metabolism by exercising muscles, and really get an increase in muscle mass. And that's one of the biggest separators, I'll use that term, between the difference and moving up. If your objective is to increase muscle mass, not just muscle strength, then you would use the difference, okay? So if your primary objective is to improve muscle stamina, then you might opt for moving up. Another unique feature of the difference, it provides a readily available complex carbohydrate source as well as omega-3 fatty acids. So as we've discussed, muscle growth, muscle mass requires carbohydrates as well as amino acids. But these carbohydrates have to be readily available, but you don't want them coming from sugar. Okay, you don't want to just throw in a lot of, high molasses feed, for example, because what that does is it spikes your insulin levels, and then your insulin levels come right back down again, and you don't get efficient utilization of those carbohydrates for muscle function. So when we say carbohydrates, we want complex carbohydrates, but we want them to be readily available. So we're looking at more in the way of long chains, complex starches in this regard for this purpose. So ingredients such as rice bran and whole flax work well for this. Whole flax gives us another feature though, and that is that whole flaxseed is also high in omega-3s. So those omega-3s can also provide some anti-inflammatory activity in concert with the anti-inflammatory activity that the nitric oxide is going to provide as well. So complex carbohydrates in combination with the omega-3 fatty acids allows us to increase muscle mass in these horses while maintaining overall wellness and attitude. The third feature of the difference is it adjusts metabolic pH in order, again, to help support that optimal carbohydrate utilization during exercise so that we can get that significant increase in muscle mass. So when we're exercising, our muscles tend to decrease metabolic pH. That drop in metabolic pH interferes with carbohydrate metabolism. So you kind of get, 2 steps forward, 1 step back. So one of the features of the difference is we help maintain or buffer metabolic pH during exercise so that those muscles can continually utilize those carbohydrates and amino acids at an optimal level. And so we get increased muscle mass, increased muscle development without having to use any pharmacological agents. A lot of trainers used to use anabolic steroids for this purpose, and rightfully so. We no longer allow those. But the difference is not an anabolic steroid. I don't want anybody to get confused there. But what I am saying, though, is we can naturally support the type of action that people used to get, from some of these pharmacological agents. We can do it much safer and in a much more natural way by using natural ingredients that we find in the difference. So let's look at a product usage guide between the two. So here, I've taken that same chart on the effect of exercise, carbohydrates, amino acids on muscle strength and muscle mass, and lined them up specifically with the moving up and the difference. So I hope this helps you see where the two kind of separate a bit. With moving up, what we're primarily supplying are amino acids, and then you supply exercise for your horse. But it's these specific amino acids, remember LLeucine as well as BetaAlanine. So with these two amino acids in combination, with the nitric oxide technology, you get a significant increase in protein synthesis by the muscle. Breakdown or protein breakdown by the muscle is not affected. So your net result is you get a significant increase in protein synthesis by the muscle, or in other words, a significant increase in muscle strength and stamina. And you will either see no change in the muscle mass, or you might see a slight improvement in the muscle growth, muscle mass on that individual horse. Now, the difference tries to combine all three components: complex but readily available carbohydrates, amino acids such as L-leucine, the chromium. You supply the exercise. So you get an increase in protein synthesis by the muscle, but not as big of a boost as what you would get when moving up. But you do get a decrease in the protein breakdown by the muscle. So the net result is you also get a significant increase in muscle strength, but notice you also get a significant increase in muscle mass. So that's kind of the way these two separate out. So think of moving up you will use if your primary objective is to enhance muscle strength and stamina. Use the difference if your primary objective is to enhance muscle development, in other words, muscle mass, as well as strength, because both products are going to support an improvement in muscle strength. Okay. Moving up, though, adds the stamina feature to it. The difference adds the increase in muscle mass feature to it. So again, keep in mind that these two products were originally developed for very specific cases, and that's why they tend to be, even though there's a lot of similarities, the end result is different. And I know we have a product called the difference, and I keep saying the difference between the two. That's why I'll use the term separate. But that's how you can separate these two products, is whether you're looking for increased muscle mass or not. Now, in chart form, some of the areas where we have had great success in using one or the other. If you feel like your horse needs better or improved muscle strength, again, you could use either one. So we have a check mark next to both moving up and the difference. If you're specifically looking for increased stamina, you're going to be better suited to use moving up. If you're looking for muscle growth or an increase in muscle mass, then you would lean towards the difference. If you've got a horse that's had a muscular injury, maybe recovering from EPM, for example, the difference can help that recovery. The difference will also help support weight gain. If you've got a performance horse, you're exercising him, but he's an easy keeper, he might be tending a little bit towards insulin resistance, even though you're exercising him. So reduce fat deposition, improve muscle definition, you would go with the difference. I don't mind sharing with you an application for the difference that we didn't think about when we first developed this product. Was if any of you have some stallions that tend to be slow breeders, tend to have a little bit low libido, the difference, I think you don't do this very often, folks, but to my knowledge, I think we're batting 1,000 on this. If you've got a stallion with low libido, the difference will improve that attitude. If you've got a horse that's tying up, specifically if you've got a horse that's been diagnosed with PSSM, particularly type 1, the moving up can actually help. And the way it helps is it helps generate muscular energy via different metabolic pathways other than glucose, other than fat. That's where that creatinine comes in, using the BetaAlanine to increase that muscular energy or muscular battery. Creatinine gives that horse that tends to tie up, or a PSSM horse, gives them another way to generate muscular energy without getting muscle tightness. Also then, if you've got a performance horse that you're trying to help support immune function at the same time, then you would lean towards moving up. And on a final note, you will find, or at least I'd say I have found over the years using these two products, is that you do get some individual variations in how a specific horse is going to respond either to moving up or the difference. And I attribute this primarily to the differences in their DNA, differences in their metabolic rates and their type of metabolism. So what I want you to remember is that both moving up and the difference, the effect that you're going to get from either one of those is dose dependent. So I will share with you that we've had a few, now not very many, but we have had a few horses on either product that after they've been on the product for a few weeks, they get to feeling a little bit too fresh. Or another way to word it is, we've had some horses feel like they're 10 foot tall and bulletproof. And so it's actually an easy fix. So all we have to do is reduce the daily dose, reduce it down until we get the horse's response at the desired level. Those tend to be horses that are very efficient at utilizing protein and energy. And so if they're already efficient and we're kind of ramping that up a bit, we can overshoot our desired effect, so to speak. So if you try either one of these and your horse gets a little bit too fresh, as we say, all you have to do is just reduce the daily dose. And you should find that happy medium between getting your desired effect and also keeping your horse's head on his shoulder. And you should get along just fine. So thank you very much. Do we have any questions?
Thanks, Dr. Bill. Yeah, so I think there's a few questions that I'd like you to touch on. So can these products be used seasonally or for particular events, or do you have to feed them continuously every day?
Okay. That's actually a question that I get asked on a regular basis on those. You can use them seasonally, I think would be a way to word that. So in other words, you don't have to feed either one of these products 365 days a year in order to maintain the beneficial effects you get from them. And I guess a perfect example of that would be for breeding stallions. Obviously, there's a breeding season. And so if you've got a horse that's got a low libido, you would only need to use the difference during breeding season. And during the off season, you could, discontinue its use and then the next season start it up again and everything works fine there. If you have a horse that you're, say, for example, you're using moving up to support, the immune function, support muscle stamina for competition reasons, and you're going to give the horse a break, you're going to give him some time off, or maybe the horse has been injured, you can discontinue the use at that point in time. And then as you put him back into training or you're ready to get back and seriously show the horse again, then you can bring, the moving up or the difference back into the program. More so with moving up than the difference, however, is remember we talked about the necessity to activate some of those metabolic enzymes that are going to help the horse produce that creatinine, that cellular battery. And so the only thing that you would have to do is kind of keep it on the calendar, give yourself at least 2 weeks before you want, moving up to become fully effective. And then as long as you're giving yourself that amount of time, then you could use it and then back off of it. But it's not going to be the kind of thing that, during the show season, for example, your next show is not until 3 weeks, so you stop using it and then bring it back in again. I would recommend that you continue using it throughout the show season. But that's not to say that if you're showing on a seasonal type basis, you can discontinue it and then bring it back in. If you're showing year round, then I would keep your horse on it year round. And I guess that brings up another point as well. There's no limit or there's no time limit on how long either one of these products will be effective. As long as you need the effect or the muscle support that either one of these products provides, you can feed it for long periods of time, and they will continue with their beneficial effect.
Okay.
So I hope that helps.
Yeah, very good. So on the note of aggression and the difference, will the difference cause, say, fillies to become aggressive?
No, it shouldn't. And I guess sometimes I get asked that because I know I mentioned anabolic steroids in the webinar. And If any of you have ever experienced using, now again, we don't use anabolic steroids anymore. I guess I'm dating myself here. But if any of you have had experience of using or know of fillies that have been given anabolic steroids, they can get kind of nasty. In fact, I think I'd rather have a colt on anabolic steroids than I would a filly in certain situations. Um, but keep in mind that the difference is not affecting those hormones as an anabolic steroid would. It's using completely natural means through the action of exercise, carbohydrate metabolism, specific amino acid metabolism, um, to provide that increased muscle strength and muscle mass feature. So it's not going to interfere, um, with the filly's aggressive type attitude. It's not going to make her studdish like an anabolic steroid might. But it can get, as I mentioned, though, so whether it's a filly or a colt, as we kind of ramp up that whole muscular metabolism, they can get feeling pretty good. And when I say they're 10 foot tall and bulletproof, I don't mean that they're aggressive. I just mean they're feeling good. And, sometimes we can get our horses feeling a little bit too good. Um, so we can just back off the dosage and get them more level-headed in that regard. But that's a great question because it's not so much an aggression response that you get as much as it's just that their energy level just increases, which is what the product is supposed to do. So just kind of keep that in mind.
Okay, very good. And then one more question for you before we wrap things up. You had talked about moving up and some of the ingredients it has to help support the immune system. Is it okay to use other products that are intended to support the immune system, or should we try to keep those separate?
Ah, thank you for asking that question because within the Stride Animal Health product lineup, great way to plug another product. We have a program called the Immune Health Program, which its primary objective is to normalize and support immune function for horses, whether it's a performance horse or just a horse that for other reasons has got less than optimal immune function. You can use these in combination. You are not going to interfere with one or the other. Keep in mind that the primary objective of the immune health program is immune function. The primary objective of moving up is actually muscular function with some immune support built into it. You could certainly use moving up on top of the immune health program and do an even better job of supporting immunity. So if you've got a horse, for example, that, is very susceptible to stress and you go to the shows and he goes off feed, doesn't want to eat, gets skin issues, et cetera, allergy issues, the immune support that's in the moving up is not going to be great enough to address those issues. So you would want to also use the immune health program in addition to that, and you can certainly use the two together.
Okay.
Okay.
Very good. Well, Dr. Bill, you have shared a wealth of knowledge with us, and I think you've offered some really excellent education on how we can take, some of these functional nutritional aids and really help our horses achieve, that higher level of performance, whether it's in the show ring or, like you said, the breeding shed. So
Yep.
again, I want to thank you for your expertise and for joining us today.
Well, thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.
Very good. And if any of our listeners are interested in incorporating moving up or the difference into your horse's program, you can find more information on both of those products by going to strideanimalhealth.com.